So here I am, guys, to talk about the trailer that just hit today that, much like its teaser trailer announcement, is getting very polarizing like-dislike ratios on its video. Ghostbusters 2016 reboot with Kristen Wiig, Melissa McCarthy, Kate McKinnon, and Leslie Jones. I wasn't one of those people like automatically hating on this thing because of the all-female angle or anything like that. No, I think, you know what, that's fine. If you want to tell an all-female Ghostbusters story, cool. Honestly, my main concern with the idea of revisiting Ghostbusters was having to deal with the fact that it felt like an unnecessary reboot. Hollywood, the business, they're gonna milk every prize heifer out there until basically they're bone dry. I should have but all just accept that at some point every one of my beloved franchises from my earlier years in childhood are going to be rebooted at some point or another with a fresh-faced cast or with a total, like, rehaul. That was my initial feelings about this. It wasn't anything having to deal with, like, oh, women can't be Ghostbusters or anything like that. Anyone can be a Ghostbuster. If anything, that's kind of the main lesson of Ghostbusters, is that your everyday average Joe or Jane can do this job. Granted, they would probably have to have a couple of degrees in quantum physics and things like that, but still, they can do this job at catching ghosts. This fantasy job. I felt like the story had been told with those characters. Very successfully with the first one, kinda sorta successfully in the second one. And that there was no need to further explore it other than in other mediums. Like the TV series, the cartoon from the 90s, for the most part, did a really good job at exploring this kind of idea and this concept and actually going a little bit beyond what the movies even accomplished. I heard when they even revisited in the mid-90s with Extreme Ghostbusters, like they were pretty successful then too, and even diversified a little bit more, like incorporating not just female Ghostbusters, but also like Ghostbusters of different cultures and credos, and even one who was in a wheelchair. The franchise, and that's kind of the key word here, the franchise was doing fine, and I feel didn't need this massive like reboot. But therein lies the problem, in the fact that I wholeheartedly believe when the first Ghostbusters came out, they had no intention of wholeheartedly franchising this thing. I feel Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and Ivan Reitman got together, came up with this really cool idea, and they wanted to have their SNL buddies in. You know, they just had a good time making a movie. But then the popularity of this movie just went beyond what they probably expected, and then at that point, okay, sure, sequels all but inevitable. Toys, cereals, cartoons, that's all there now. This is gonna be a big-ass franchise. And even going into Ghostbusters 2, the main actors, I believe, even had something to say like, you know, we don't know if we want to revisit this territory again in a sequel. Which is probably why it wasn't as welcomed as the first one, perhaps. But let's get down to this reboot, this trailer here. The actresses they have playing the Ghostbusters in this movie. I hope that this movie works out for them. I do. Like, I don't want to go in hating this thing automatically, and I want to give them the benefit of a doubt. But it's so hard to disconnect from the original Ghostbusters and this one. Like, I really do want to judge this trailer on its own merits, but it's very hard to do that when within the first couple of seconds of this trailer, they reference that 30 years ago, 4 scientists, by the way, Winston wasn't a scientist, 4 scientists saved New York City. But they've established, or they've been saying in a lot of press release stuff, that this is not a continuation of that universe, that this is a clear the slate, straight ahead, starting from scratch, reboot with these characters, starting up the Ghostbusters franchise for the first time ever in this world. So already, I was a little unnerved by that, mainly because of the fact that that is just a blatant, like, nostalgia cash grab for the studio. In other words, they're not caring about whether or not you get invested in characters or story. They're just saying, oh, you remember this movie from 30 years ago, these events from 30 years ago with similar people? Come see this one. It'll be just as good. I feel like that kind of was shooting itself in the foot a little bit, even having that text scroll in the beginning saying like 30 years ago, these 4 guys saved New York City. You should have just started leading people into the trailer without giving them any sort of reference. Show the pan of New York City, show the old firehouse, and then people get the idea. Show the symbol on the wall of the Ghostbusters insignia, and then people get the idea of like, oh, this is what it is. So they won't automatically be already set on edge of being like, oh man, they're referencing that thing I liked from my childhood. It has nothing to do with this. Take, for example, the new Ninja Turtles movies. Have your opinion about those movies, whether they suck or whether they're okay or what have you. At least in those trailers, they didn't say 20 some years ago, another company with Jim Henson did this way better. Getting into seeing these characters develop their weapons, come together as a team, getting an idea of what the ghosts are going to look like in this universe. I don't have an issue with the ghost effects here. I've seen a lot of comments on the trailer and on certain forums saying like, it looks like it's taken out of the live action Scooby-Doo movie. And yeah, it does. But you know what? The ghosts in the original Ghostbusters movie and in the cartoons and everything like that, they were cartoony, they were outrageous, and we didn't question it then. So I'm not going to worry so much about the look of the ghosts in this particular setup. In fact, they look the most human that I've ever seen ghosts in this franchise. With the exception of Slimer, of course, who just shows up randomly. So I'm not going to knock the effects because, you know what? The effects are going to, is it going to be CGI? Most likely. Is it going to be fluorescent as all hell? Most likely, because it's going to be a bright, colorful, ectoplasmic world. There's quite a few things that I feel they kind of give away here. For one, Chris Hemsworth looks like he's possessed or looks like he has a bigger role to play as maybe obstacle or villain as opposed to just their secretary. You get to look at the brand new Ecto one, which fine, cool, I like Cadillacs. And you see a lot of the technology being made, which is fine. If they want to tell this story about these four women coming together and building this stuff from scratch, cool, fine. I have no problem with that. My big concern right now with the trailer, and I hope it doesn't hold for the whole rest of the movie, is that I didn't find it that funny. And that's no knock really against the actresses involved because I've seen them in funny movies. I enjoy them in funny movies. I love Kristen Wiig in a good funny movie. Like Bridesmaids, I actually enjoyed. Spy with Melissa McCarthy, I actually enjoyed. Parts of The Heat I thought were pretty good. When thinking about it, those trailers for those particular movies, they didn't sell me so much on the premise of those movies to begin with either. So maybe it's just a Paul Feig thing where he has lousy trailers that don't merit much laughter from me, but the actual movie itself will be pretty comedic. So I'm kind of hoping that a lot of the A material wasn't just shown off in this trailer and that there's actually a lot of good, well-developed jokes and one-liners and maybe some linorama, maybe some good character moments interspliced throughout the whole film. But this trailer, there was just none of the jokes were really landing for me. The scene where Kristen Wiig is freaked out by Kate McKinnon wearing a wig and a funny hat, okay, it's quirky. I guess she's the quirky one. Where Leslie Jones slaps a ghost right out of Melissa McCarthy. I don't know, I've seen Melissa McCarthy get beat up way too much. That right now is kind of my main thing, is that I'll go watch the movie. I'm curious enough. I want to see what they do different. I want to see if there is some kind of heart and character involved in this movie. Because I don't want to go in mad to a movie. I rarely ever want to go in hating something right off the bat. But that is kind of a concern for me, is like, Ghostbusters has to have a good balance of funny and adventurous and scary. And I feel like in the original, a lot of the humor stemmed from these characters weren't too far from the actual actors' personalities. Bill Murray as Peter Venkman is very much Bill Murray, almost. Dan Aykroyd as Ray Stantz. You know, Dan Aykroyd has these very fascinating and passionate interests about things scientific. A lot of Harold Ramis's kind of dry deadpan delivery comes from a little bit of Harold Ramis, honestly. Part of the comedy was just seeing these people work off of each other, seeing these characters that weren't too far from their core personalities interact. In this one, I don't really get a good beat on what these characters are about. But who knows? Maybe that won't be the bulk of it. I hope to God that these characters do have a lot of range to them, that I do get a better sense of what is kind of driving them beyond just being like, well, here's your Ray type character, here's your Winston type. Man, the dislike-like ratio on this thing is fascinating to see. I'm not hating on this thing at all. I'm curious. I've got some trepidations, but I'm not hating on it at all. Because guess what? I've got my 2-pack of Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 right behind me that I can watch any old time. And much like the sponges, they're not migrating that far. I'm gonna give this movie a shot. I hope that it warrants some well-earned chuckles from me in the theater. That is my main thing right now, is I just want some things to work for me comedically in this movie, because it does just kind of feel a little... Honestly, it was the response I had to trailers for things like RoboCop and Terminator Genisys. RoboCop, which was basically a straight-up reboot of it. I saw trailers for that, and I wasn't wowed or dazzled by any of the action or by any of the spectacle of it. Same thing with Terminator Genisys. A little bit worse with Terminator Genisys, because even though it was kind of a reboot, it was still a continuation of something that I felt didn't need continuing. But again, watch my Terminator Genisys review for my whole deal with that. But very much had that same reaction of like... okay, I hope this is okay. It's very much what I'm feeling right now with Ghostbusters. I'm not wowed, but I'm not dismayed either. Definitely interested, but I've got some concerns. Prove me wrong, Ghostbusters.